Is this some kind of joke? My sister Kate's voice was tight with anger on the phone. You call our mother on her birthday. Tell her you're too busy with your important Silicon Valley job to visit. And then lecture her about wasting money on her medication? Mom's been crying for hours. I sat frozen in my Seattle apartment, thousands of miles from my family in Boston, trying to process what Kate was saying. I hadn't called my mother. I hadn't spoken to anyone in my family for days, buried in work, on a critical security implementation. Before I could respond, Kate continued. And that comment about her impending dementia, that was cruel, even for you lately. A cold realization settled over me as pieces clicked into place. The strange texts from colleagues about conversations we'd never had. The email from my boss referencing a call where I'd supposedly pitched a controversial project approach. The Venmo requests from friends thanking me for the loan I'd promised in recent phone conversations. Someone was impersonating me, not just in text, but in convincing voice calls, and I was almost certain I knew who. 3 weeks earlier, my friend and former roommate Marcus had asked me to test a voice project he was working on, recording me reading dozens of seemingly random phrases. Marcus, who had recently started working for a shady tech startup after being fired from our company for ethical violations. Marcus, who had asked to crash on my couch just for a few days and left, with a copy of my laptop key and knowledge of my passwords. I took a deep breath. Kate, I need you to believe me. That wasn't me on the phone. I never called Mom today. Silence stretched between us before she responded. Then who the hell has been calling everyone in your life pretending to be you? Because whoever it is, they sound exactly like you. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Voice Breach Protocol. I don't know yet, I told her calmly, but I'm going to find out and fix it. My name is Ethan Reynolds, 32 years old, Senior Cybersecurity Architect at Vertex Systems, where I specialize in threat detection and digital forensics for major financial institutions and government contractors. My job requires identifying system vulnerabilities, tracking intrusion patterns, and designing countermeasures against increasingly sophisticated digital attacks. I've built my reputation on methodical analysis, attention to detail, and an almost pathological calm under pressure. Those same qualities define my personal life: organized, deliberate, measured in both action and reaction. I met Marcus Chen during our graduate program in computer science at MIT. We weren't close friends initially, but we respected each other's technical abilities. After graduation, I helped him land a position at Vertex, where our professional relationship deepened into friendship. When he divorced 3 years ago, I offered him my spare room until he found a new place. When he struggled with coding challenges, I stayed late to help him work through solutions. When management began noticing inconsistencies in his security protocols, I vouched for his capabilities. That last decision proved to be a mistake. 6 months ago, Marcus was terminated after an internal investigation revealed he had been bypassing security measures to sell minor but proprietary code snippets to competitors. Nothing major enough for criminal charges, but a clear violation of both contract and trust. I hadn't spoken to him since his termination meeting, where he blamed me for not covering for him more effectively. You could have fixed this if you wanted to, he'd said, his voice cold. I thought we were friends. 3 weeks ago, he'd reached out via text, his tone conciliatory. He was working for a new AI startup focused on voice synthesis technology, he explained. He needed native English speakers to provide training data and was offering $300 for a 1-hour recording session. Having known Marcus for years, I should have been more suspicious, but the request seemed harmless, reading random phrases for machine learning purposes with standard practice in voice AI development. The recording session in his small apartment-turned-home office had been unremarkable. I read approximately 250 sentences ranging from simple greetings to complex technical discussions, occasionally repeating phrases with different emotional inflections at his request. Marcus explained they were developing more naturalistic voice synthesis for customer service applications. I noted the professional-grade microphone setup but thought nothing of it at the time. Now, as I documented the timeline in my voice breach protocol file, the methodical approach was both professional habit and personal coping mechanism. The voice calling my mother and colleagues wasn't a rough approximation. According to my sister, it sounded exactly like me. This suggested advanced voice cloning technology, likely using the recordings to train an AI model that could generate novel sentences in my voice with natural-sounding inflections and speech patterns. After finishing my call with Kate, I made 3 more calls in rapid succession. First, to my mother, explaining the situation and apologizing for the distress caused by someone impersonating me. Second, to my boss, clarifying that I hadn't made the calls he'd referenced and briefly explaining the suspected voice cloning. Third, to my bank, placing additional verification requirements on my accounts beyond voice authentication. Next, I sent a carefully worded text to Marcus. Interesting voice synthesis project you're working on. We should discuss its applications. Coffee tomorrow? His response came quickly. Sorry man, swamped with work. Maybe next week? His deflection confirmed my suspicions, that rather than confronting him immediately, I began systematic information gathering. I needed to understand the full scope of the impersonation before determining an appropriate response. Using my cybersecurity background, I created a monitoring protocol to track unusual communication supposedly from me. I contacted close friends and family with a coded warning about potential impersonation. I reviewed recent financial transactions and account access logs. The picture that emerged over the next 48 hours was concerning. Marcus had apparently been using my synthesized voice for at least 2 weeks, making calls to family members, colleagues, and friends. The content of these calls followed several patterns. 1. Financial requests, asking friends to send money through payment apps for fabricated emergencies, usually $200 to $500 amounts. 2. Personal relationship damage, calling family members with uncharacteristically harsh or dismissive comments, particularly targeting my mother's health concerns and my sister's recent job loss. 3. Professional sabotage, contacting work colleagues with contradictory project instructions or inappropriate comments, including suggesting to a junior female team member that her promotion was due to diversity quotas rather than talent. Each instance was carefully calibrated, serious enough to cause damage but not so outrageous that recipients would immediately question if it was really me. The voice clone was being used not just for petty financial gain, but for systematic reputation destruction. Most concerning was a pattern of calls to my largest client, Meridian Financial, where Marcus had apparently been using my voice to request sensitive database access, claiming it was for security testing purposes. Fortunately, Meridian's protocols required multi-factor authentication beyond voice verification, preventing any actual breach. However, the attempts themselves could have severely damaged my professional credibility had they been traced back to me. By day 3 of my investigation, I had documented 17 distinct instances of voice impersonation, affecting relationships across my personal and professional life. Each required individual damage control while I developed a comprehensive response strategy. Throughout, I maintained my characteristic calm, approaching the problem as I would a complex security breach, with methodical analysis rather than emotional reaction. The question was, what did Marcus hope to gain? The small financial scams seemed opportunistic rather than his primary motivation. The personal and professional relationship damage suggested a more vindictive purpose, punishment for not protecting his job. Perhaps but the attempted access to client systems pointed to something potentially more calculated. I needed to understand his endgame before determining my response. Direct confrontation seemed premature. If Marcus was planning something larger using my voice, alerting him to my awareness might cause him to accelerate his timeline. Instead, I decided on a dual approach. Continue gathering information while developing countermeasures against further damage. First, I created a digital fingerprint of authentic communications from me, sharing it with key contacts and establishing verification protocols beyond voice recognition. Second, I contacted a trusted colleague at our company's legal department, documenting the voice theft without formally filing charges yet. Third, I reached out to a former classmate now working in digital forensics at the FBI, discussing voice cloning fraud in hypothetical terms while gathering information about legal boundaries and enforcement options. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. An intern at my company mentioned casually that she'd been approached about a job at Marcus's new startup, describing it as using AI voice synthesis for identity verification bypass. This wasn't a personal vendetta or simple fraud scheme. Marcus appeared to be developing a commercial product designed to circumvent security systems. Further investigation through industry contacts revealed that Marcus had secured seed funding from questionable sources for a startup named VoicePass, marketing itself as providing authentication solutions, but apparently developing tools to defeat voice-based security. He was using my voice as a test case, demonstrating to potential clients or investors how effectively his technology could impersonate a security professional with access to valuable systems. With this understanding, I developed a three-phase response plan. Phase 1: documentation and protection. Complete documentation of all known impersonation instances. Implementation of advanced verification protocols with all contacts. Secure all financial and professional access points against voice authentication. Phase 2: evidence collection. Record evidence of Marcus's voice cloning activities. Identify potential clients or investors he was targeting. Document damages resulting from the impersonation. Phase 3: decisive response. Confront Marcus in a controlled environment with evidence collected. Involve legal authorities as appropriate. Implement public correction of the false communications. The execution of this plan began immediately. Phases 1 and 2 proceeded methodically over the next week. I learned that Marcus had scheduled a demonstration for potential investors at a downtown Seattle office building, where he planned to showcase his technology's ability to defeat security systems by using my voice to access protected resources. This demonstration presented the perfect opportunity for Phase 3, a controlled confrontation with witnesses present. Rather than alerting Marcus to my knowledge or sending cease and desist letters that could be ignored, I would appear in person at precisely the moment he was demonstrating my voice. The unexpected physical presence of someone supposedly elsewhere would create maximum impact and provide irrefutable evidence of his deception. On the day of the demonstration, I arrived at the building early, coordinating with security to ensure access to the meeting room without prior announcement. I wore a recording device approved by my legal team and brought a USB drive containing all documented instances of voice impersonation. My former FBI classmate had provided guidance on ensuring evidence admissibility should criminal charges become necessary. At precisely 2:17 p.m., I entered the conference room where Marcus was mid-presentation to 5 potential investors. A high-quality speaker was playing what was unmistakably my voice, saying, "As a senior security architect, I can access any protected system using just voice authentication. Most financial institutions haven't implemented adequate protective measures against synthetic voice attacks." The room fell silent as I stepped through the door. Marcus froze, the color draining from his face as he registered my presence. The disconnect between my voice still playing from the speaker and my physical presence in the room created exactly the dramatic effect I'd anticipated. "Please continue," I said calmly, my actual voice creating an eerie doubling effect with the synthetic version still emanating from the speaker. "You were explaining how you've been using my voice without consent to demonstrate security vulnerabilities." The investors shifted uncomfortably, looking between Marcus and me with growing concern. One woman closed her laptop and began gathering her materials without a word. "Ethan," Marcus recovered quickly, forcing a smile. "I was just showing these folks our voice synthesis technology, using your recordings as an example since you helped us with development. Nothing malicious." "That's not entirely accurate," I replied, maintaining my calm demeanor as I connected my laptop to the room's projection system. "Let me provide some additional context for your potential investors." Over the next 15 minutes, I methodically presented evidence of how my voice had been used without consent. The calls to family members, the financial requests to friends, the damaging professional communications, and the attempts to access secure systems. Throughout, I remained factual and unemotional, focusing on documented incidents rather than accusations. "This isn't just unethical," I concluded. "It's illegal on multiple fronts: identity theft, fraud, computer crimes, and potentially corporate espionage, given the attempted access to client systems." The investors were already standing, one actively on his phone canceling his next meeting with Marcus. Another spoke directly. "This presentation is over, and so is any potential investment relationship." Marcus's composure finally broke. "You're overreacting. This was just a proof of concept using a willing participant. You recorded those phrases voluntarily for what you described as generic machine learning research," I countered. "Not for impersonating me to my family, colleagues, and clients. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" As the investors filed out, I stayed behind, motioning for Marcus to sit. For the first time since discovering the voice theft, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal by someone I had considered a friend. "Why?" I asked simply. "Beyond the obvious financial motives, why target me specifically? Why my mother, Marcus? She's 73 and has anxiety issues." His expression cycled through anger, defiance, and finally a kind of resigned bitterness. "You always land on your feet, don't you? Perfect Ethan with his perfect job and perfect reputation. When I got fired, you gave me that disappointed look, but did nothing to help me stay. Do you know how hard it is to get security clearance work after being terminated for ethics violations? You could have prevented that with one word to management. By lying about your actions?" I asked. "That wouldn't have helped either of us long term." "Easy to say from your position," he muttered. "This technology is valuable. Voice authentication is everywhere now, and everyone knows it's vulnerable, but no one wants to admit how vulnerable. I was going to build something that finally forced the industry to address the weaknesses by committing actual fraud with stolen voices." He had no answer for that. The aftermath unfolded methodically, as carefully planned as every other aspect of my response. With the evidence I'd gathered, the legal case was straightforward. Marcus faced charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and computer crimes. His startup collapsed immediately when investors withdrew all support. The few friends who had sent money based on my supposed requests were reimbursed from Marcus's frozen accounts. Repairing personal relationships proved more challenging. My mother eventually accepted that the hurtful voice hadn't been mine, but the experience left her more anxious about technology and communication. My sister Kate was quicker to understand, but admitted the voice had been so convincing that she still sometimes wondered if I'd actually made those calls and was covering my tracks. Colleagues and clients required detailed explanations of voice cloning technology and new verification protocols for future communications. 6 months after confronting Marcus, I received notice that he had accepted a plea deal, avoiding jail time but accepting probation, restitution payments, and a ban from working in information security or artificial intelligence fields for 5 years. His letter of apology, required by the court, arrived the same day. 3 paragraphs of carefully worded contrition that managed to avoid taking full responsibility while technically fulfilling the legal requirement. I filed the letter away without responding and turned my attention to more constructive efforts. The experience had highlighted legitimate security vulnerabilities that needed addressing. I developed a comprehensive framework for multi-factor authentication that specifically addressed synthetic voice vulnerabilities, publishing it as an open security standard and implementing it with my clients. I also began speaking at industry conferences about the emerging threats of AI-enabled impersonation, using my own experience as a case study with personal details omitted in a strange way. Marcus had accomplished part of his stated goal. The security industry was finally taking voice authentication weaknesses seriously, just not in the way he'd intended. 1 year after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from one of the investors who had been present that day. Her firm was funding research into authentication methods that could reliably distinguish between human and AI-generated voices. Would I be interested in consulting on the project? I agreed immediately. The best response to technology misused wasn't retreat but advancement, developing better systems, stronger protections, more ethical implementations. In architecture, we design buildings to withstand earthquakes, not by making them completely rigid, but by incorporating flexibility and resilience. Security works the same way, not through impenetrable barriers, but through adaptive, layered protections that anticipate how systems might fail. My friend used AI to copy my voice, but didn't expect me to show up in person. His plan failed not because the technology didn't work. It worked disturbingly well, but because he fundamentally misunderstood the nature of security. True security isn't just about technological barriers. It's about human awareness, institutional protocols, and thoughtful response to emerging threats. The most sophisticated voice cloning algorithm couldn't replicate the judgment, relationships, and trust that defined who I was beyond mere words and sounds. In the aftermath, people often asked if I was angry about the violation. The truth was more complicated. I felt disappointment in a friendship that had apparently meant less to Marcus than it did to me. I felt concern about technology being developed without ethical constraints. But mostly, I felt a renewed sense of purpose in my work. Voices can be copied. Passwords can be stolen. Systems can be breached. But approaching these challenges with methodical calm and strategic thinking remains the most powerful security tool we have. Marcus's mistake wasn't just ethical or legal. His fundamental error was tactical. He thought technology alone could defeat a security system designed and maintained by humans who understand that technology is only one component of true security. He didn't expect me to show up in person because he was thinking about voice as an authentication method, not as part of a complete identity embedded in relationships and trust. That narrow thinking was his vulnerability, one I exploited with nothing more complicated than my physical presence in a room where only my voice was expected. In security, as in life, sometimes the most effective countermeasure isn't a sophisticated technological response, but simply showing up where you're least expected, armed with the truth and a methodical plan.